our two featured speakers for today are Gabrielle DiDomenico, or Gabe. Gabe grew up in the Syracuse area and holds a degree in medical anthropology and has worked as project coordinator for Seven Valleys Health Coalition for 5 years. During her time at SVHC, she has helped to lead local food systems work through the Cortland Food Project, a USDA Farmers Market Promotion Program grant, and most currently through Department of Environmental Conservation funding. She is working to establish Seven Valleys Food Rescue in the Cortland area. Our second speaker is Jesse Kearns. Jesse is a program manager with the Syracuse University Center for Sustainable Community Solutions. Through grant-funded projects, he assists communities and stakeholders throughout New York State with waste reduction, reuse, and recycling initiatives, and specializes in wasted food prevention, food recovery, and organics recycling. He also serves as chair for NYSAR3's, I don't know that acronym, he'll have to introduce us to it when he speaks, Statewide Organics Council. He received his master's degree in environmental science from SUNY ESF in 2017 and lives in Oswego County, where he is attempting to convert a large portion of his backyard into a pollinator meadow. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the two of you. I believe you have your own slides, but if there are any technical issues, I have yours as backup.
Wonderful. Thank you, Maura. Shall I just jump in then? Jesse said,
take it away.
Good? All right, let's do this. All right, I'm going to try to, all right, audience window. I want to make sure that you guys can see my window, and can you not see my notes? Like I'm hopeful for this. You see, awesome. Okay, this is good. I'm working in a little bit of a new platform. All right. Well, hello, everybody. As Maura said, I am Gabrielle, Gabe DiDomenico, and I'm excited to share with you about Seven Valleys Food Rescue. This is a new program that's happening in Cortland County. As I go through the presentation, I just want you to keep in mind that this original idea for food rescue in our county came out of the Cortland Food Project. Now, the Cortland Food Project is just like SOFSA, so we're Cortland's food policy group. And so I just want to encourage you. So it's a little encouragement, and just say, go SOFSA. You can do some really cool things when you're working together. And so I'm excited to be here. All right. I'll just do a quick introduction to the Seven Valleys Food Rescue team. There is myself. Hello. There's also Adrienne Traub. She is on this call. She helps with distribution communication. Avery Barber is our AmeriCorps member. She's also on this call. She helps build up our system of flow and kind of refine our internal process. And then we have Elaine Zing. She's an Emerson Fellow from the Congressional Hunger Center, and she's working on a storytelling program for our food rescue group, which is really amazing. To date, Seven Valleys Food Rescue has rescued over 23,000 pounds of food. Roughly, this converts to like 12,500 pounds of carbon emissions being eliminated, and then also 19,500 meals being served. Like if you convert that 23,000 pounds of food, what that equals out. Our goal as a food rescue is to reduce the amount of edible food going into the landfill, and then also to connect our neighbors who may be food insecure with better nutrition. I'm just going to give you some broad strokes, the inside scoop, how we're structured, and then I'll get into the bread and butter piece, so like the fun pieces like donations, food, and then volunteers. All right. So our program for Seven Valleys Food Rescue is currently housed under Seven Valleys Health Coalition. We have a partnership with the city of Cortland. Seven Valleys Health Coalition is a community health nonprofit. They've been in the community for over 20 years doing some really great stuff. They have a variety of health work that they do, but they have a strong focus, especially in the past 5 years, on the local food system. So they do things like help lead the Cortland Food Project or do local food promotion. That's Adrienne's job. Cooking classes, subsidized CSA programs for low-income neighbors. They also put together the Cortland County Local Foods Map. Seven Valleys Food Rescue eventually desires to become independent, its own program and entity in time. But we have found that networks and being in the foundation of Seven Valleys Health Coalition has been super helpful as we start out. Funding. So for the past 2 years, we have been funded through a New York State Department of Environmental Conservation grant. The real title of it is a mouthful. It's Municipal Food Scraps Reduction, Food Donation, and Food Scraps Recycling Grant. I don't know who came up with that one. But we also have a matching grant through the Health Foundation of CNY, Western Central New York. The city of Cortland provides in-kind support. So they actually hold the contract that we have through the DEC, but then they subcontract out to us and they're a financial pass-through. And Seven Valleys Health Coalition does a lot of in-kind support. They're our office space right now. They provide technology for us, and staff of Seven Valleys has done a lot in terms of food rescue runs if volunteers can't or something kind of comes up and needs to be last minute. So shout out to staff. All right, partnerships. Partnerships are so important to us. We try not to do anything in a bubble and know that it really takes a village to accomplish a worthwhile goal. So for inward facing partnerships or partnerships that help build up our program knowledge, we're members of the Food Rescue Alliance. They're a coalition of food rescue organizations across the United States. We're also members of Fresh Food Connect, and they are a national program as well. And they help gardeners easily donate excess produce that they have. We also currently lead bi-monthly meetings with New York State food rescue leaders. A couple months ago, Adrian and I were just really sensing a lack of communication between food rescue groups in New York State. And so we wanted to kind of remedy that. If you're interested in attending these meetings, please just give a shout out to myself or Adrian, and we'd be happy to plug you into that list. And then also we work extremely close with a neighboring food rescue, and that's Friendship Donations in Ithaca, and they've been fantastic. All right, community backing is so important, and most of us know we really can't get far with a community program if you don't have community buy-in. So community partners are really what makes a program viable like this. This list just shows like a snapshot of what type of community partners we have. We have everything from something that's bigger like Ag-Biotic, they're up north actually, and do lots of greens growing, to something very small like a very rural, tiny little church pantry. Our goal is to make a food rescue program that suits our community well. We don't want to just work off our ideas of what we think. And so a diversity of partnership really matters to us. We are currently doing a survey with community members to know best how to design the program. We also have sent out recently 11,000 plus mailers, like direct mailers, to introduce the program to our community. Soliciting feedback is constant for us because we believe in participatory design. Donations. All right. So where does our rescue food come from? Well, we're rural. Cortland County is very rural. We're actually more agrarian. We only have about 46,000 people in our county. So we had to be very unique with our donations. We currently don't rely on big food stores right now, like a lot of food rescue do. To date, our food has really come from places like farmers and local producers, gardeners, small like mom and pop grocery stores, out of county folks like Ag-Biotic, or we just had someone that gave us like a pallet of cheese. And that was been very interesting. And so Adrian ran to Binghamton to get that. With the new DEC law that's coming into effect, we're hoping to grow where we're rescuing food from. If you want to know more about that law, Adrian, would you mind just popping that in the chat box? You can kind of see who's on Onondaga County's list. Either they have to donate or recycle, depending on the size of their business or organization. We manage donations by creating networks. So we learn who can take what and how much. We work very closely with 211 Cortland, Food Bank of CNY, Peter, if you're on here, Peter Ricardo, hello. Feeding New York State, we work closely with them. Jay Hawkins, if you're on here, hello to you. But one of our main desires is to let donors really, so those who are giving us food, decide what approach works best for them. So alerts for donations usually come through things like apps and text. So that's the usual process for food rescues these days, you know, a little more on the techie side. In our county, being a bit more rural, we were, you know, a little surprised that wasn't going to work out for us. So a lot of times we just kick it old school, and it's phone calls and emails in terms of getting donation alerts. We identify areas of need by checking in frequently with those who are actually doing the work. So food rescue is great, but you're a little bit there's a gap between like the people that you're actually serving, right? Because you're just kind of that middleman. And so we check in with those that are actually serving. So yes, your local food pantries, but people like Capco, Salvation Army, those that are working with food insecure neighbors directly. And thinking outside the box is really one of our values. And Adrian's been phenomenal at this. We have found that some of our best partners, like distribution partners to get the food to where it needs to go, have been places like low income daycare centers, even our correctional facility, which was just a really cool win for us. Volunteers. So we rely on volunteers. We can't do what we do without them. They're the gas in our engine. We currently have about 35 volunteers who stand ready, and onboarding for us is really pretty simple. Hello, you want to volunteer? Here's a waiver, sign it. Okay, you're good. We're really hoping to get a little bit more formal than that, to do like a 101 to food rescuing, but we're getting there. Volunteers utilize their own vehicles. So Seven Valleys Food Rescue does not have any vehicles of their own. So that keeps things pretty low in terms of risk. In the beginning, we did work with Seven Valleys Health Coalition's insurance company just to make sure everything was kosher. We utilize an email list and keep it pretty simple to alert volunteers to food rescue work. And so basically how it goes is a donor reaches out to Adrian and I, or even the Seven Valleys Health Coalition office. Adrian sees where that food can go, and then I alert volunteers and we see who can fill that shifts, and then we send them on their way with as much detail as we can give them. We currently do not have any space. We're hoping to remedy that in the upcoming year. So donations right now go from point A of pickup to point B to drop off. There's really no cold storage with us. It's a lot of coordination. Volunteers have helped with anything from gleaning fruit fields to reoccurring weekly runs to large packaging distribution events. And we've even had some really great this past year, somebody who just had apple trees in the yard. They're like, can somebody come and like get all my apples and pears? And so it's perfect. The great thing about volunteering and doing food rescue is anybody can do it. It doesn't really require any skills. There's a little picture of my nieces and nephews picking blueberries at a big blueberry gleaning event. So that's it. That's kind of us, like quick and dirty. Seven Valleys Food Rescue in a nutshell. In some ways, we are building the plane as we fly it. So if you have any like bright light, like light bulb moments or ideas for us, please connect with us, because we're always looking to network and learn. Awesome. Did that stop my share?
It did, yeah.
Oh, whew. That went way smoother than I expected some hiccups.
All right, Maura, should I just take it away and then questions we'll do afterwards? Okay, I'm gonna share my screen next. And how's that? Can you see that okay? Okay, so hello again, everyone. It's very nice to see you all, meet you all today, and to have the privilege to be able to speak to you a little bit about the work that I'm doing. I'm going to keep this really short and sweet. I could go into a lot of background about some of the projects and initiatives that I've been a part of for the last 5 years or so, but I really wanted to take this opportunity to pitch more or less my wish list of things that I'd love to work with SOFSA and other community members to try to go after. So as Maura said, I'm program manager at Syracuse University Center for Sustainable Community Solution. We're housed within Syracuse University, but we're kind of our own nonprofit center. We're fully funded by external grants from the federal level, so from the U.S. Department of Agriculture and from the Environmental Protection Agency, but we also have some state level grants too that come to us from DEC through various channels. And our work is, the team that I'm on, we focus entirely on a topic called sustainable materials management. You might know it better as waste management. Sustainable materials management is synonymous with the 3 R's, with waste reduction, reuse, and recycling. So we're looking at the entire waste stream and trying to figure out how can we divert as much of this material as possible from going to landfill and waste combustion facilities like the Covanta facility in Jamesville on the south side of Syracuse, where all of Onondaga County's waste goes to. Within sustainable materials management, I, in the past few years, have been specializing in the organics waste stream. So anything that comes from nature and that is able to be biologically degraded or composted down and reused. That's my focus. I'm really starting to build a lot of programming with new funding for wasted food prevention, for edible food rescue, for composting, and then the beneficial use of that finished compost as well. And here's my motivation why. This is a photo from Cornell University's campus. This is all of the food waste. I don't know the date when this photo was taken, but food waste coming out of their cafeteria facilities. And I use this to illustrate this huge statistic that I'm trying to combat, that I'm working against. The US is estimated by the USDA wastes upwards to 40% of all the food that we produce. And this food waste is occurring at every single stage of the food supply chain. This is something you all might be, pretty familiar with. We lose a little bit of food on farms, we lose some in transportation, we lose some at distribution centers, at grocery stores, and a whole bunch of food is wasted in the homes as well. And so this is where I'm focusing my work. I want to combat this percentage. I want to walk this percentage down to 30%, to 20%, to 10%. And I'd like to do that starting in the central New York area. Though the grant funding I have does send me all over New York State as well. I'm not just housed in central New York. I do work from Long Island all the way to Erie County and beyond too. What's that look like with a little bit of a different stat? This background photo is of a landfill in Albany, New York. If you've never been to a landfill before, they're pretty intense places. They're very loud, they're very smelly, dusty, lots of birds flying around trying to get at all the food, because about a fifth of what we send to landfills and waste combustion facilities is food. And if you think about a waste combustion facility like the Covanta one in Jamesville, it's very inefficient to burn food because it has such a high water content. So it makes no sense to be sending these materials either to landfill or waste combustion. In landfills, they actually produce a lot of methane gas, which is a very potent greenhouse gas. But something else I wanted to point out, wasting food is a lot more than just wasting that food itself. It's wasting everything that we invest to growing that food. So it wastes all the energy, all the land space, the labor, the fresh water. In some parts of the country, that's a very serious thing, to be wasting fresh water when you might have water shortages. All the inputs, pesticides, fertilizers, and as Gabe mentioned, we're wasting nutritional opportunities too. We have a large portion of our society, for many systemic reasons, don't have the type of nutritional food that they need. And we're kind of squandering that by throwing it into the trash. So this is the motivation for all the work that I'm doing. And I approach it from that 3R perspective. So number one, I want to create initiatives and programs and projects that help to prevent waste before it occurs. This is a photo of produce that came to the Okra compost facility on the west side of Syracuse from a grocery chain. And just looking at that, you can think, man, wouldn't it be great if we could just prevent some of those oranges and potatoes from going to waste in the first place? Yeah, it's great that it's being composted because it's going to have a beneficial use, but it would have an even bigger environmental and social and economic impact if we can prevent that waste from occurring in the first place. So I'm trying to develop programming for businesses and institutions, K through 12 schools, to look at their processes and to think of the interventions or system changes that we can make to help reduce the amount of food waste that they generate. I had mentioned that the home is a very big place where food waste occurs. Out of all the food waste that's generated in the US, roughly 40% happens in our homes. So I've worked with Peter and others throughout New York State to try to generate awareness about this and to create educational materials and learning opportunities, outreach education for residents about little strategies that they can employ at home to cut down on food waste. So one of the big ones is there's incredible date label confusion, best by, sell by, freeze by, best if used by. It's very confusing, and through some sociological research, we've learned that it leads to a whole lot of food waste. So we've been trying to educate people about what do these date labels really mean? If something goes past its best by date, does that mean that it's all of a sudden unsafe to eat? There's a fair amount of education that has to go into that. And then some other initiatives too, like how do we preserve or extend the shelf life of perishable foods through freezing or drying or canning, or just knowing the proper environments that produce likes to be in to make it last as long as it can. What about using food scraps before composting? That's the image I got in the background. Whenever I have wilty celery or onion peels, I tend to save those up in a container in my freezer. And then when I have enough, I make some veggie stock out of it. So promoting some initiatives like that. And then just general meal planning and organizational things that you can do in your refrigerator and pantry to keep you organized and not losing track of food that all of a sudden you discover later and it's already gone past its usability. So those are just some of the examples of the waste prevention. We have different strategies that we do when we work with K through 12 schools or businesses or institutions. Moving down the 3R hierarchy a little bit, the next one is rescue. So if we can't cut down on waste before it occurs, can we rescue some of this food and prevent it from going to waste? And this is just reiterating what Gabe went through with Seven Valleys Food Rescue and all of the excellent programming that they're doing down there. I'm really trying to learn as much as I can from Seven Valleys and some of the other food rescue organizations throughout the state. because I'd like to help this group and help Syracuse and Onondaga set up an organization similar to that can complement the really incredible efforts of the Food Bank of CNY. Peter had mentioned earlier that the food bank, it moves more than 20 million pounds of food each year. They service 11 counties. They have more than 400 partner organizations. But even with that Herculean effort, there's still a lot of food waste that's not being captured that doesn't necessarily fit the food bank model. That can be really difficult for their model to go out and capture. And that's where food rescue networks really come into place. So here's a photo of us at the end of October. We went to see Jacob at Salt City Harvest Farm. He had roughly 300-foot long rows of carrots that hadn't been harvested yet. So we brought out a group of volunteers and we picked about a little over 120 pounds of carrots that then went to Interfaith Works of CNY, and they were able to distribute out to some food pantries on the north and south side of Syracuse. So this was just the very beginning efforts of establishing a food rescue network for Onondaga County. And I would like to keep that torch going and try to take the next steps to get that going for Onondaga County. And then there could be some really great partnerships between Onondaga and Cortland County and with Cayuga and Tompkins County, we could start to kind of piece the counties together, I think. So that's the next step. The edible food that's out there that we can connect as a short-term solution to people facing food insecurity right now, while we're working on those longer, more root causes of poverty and food insecurity. And
Sorry
then,
to interrupt.
Sure.
I'm one of the listeners. Hi, Jesse. This is Kyle. Would you speak a little bit more slower?
Sure,
That's
absolutely,
possible.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yep, yeah, I can slow down. Sorry about that. I was trying to be sensitive of time and to make sure that everyone could get through the agenda. So food rescue is the next one. Then moving down the hierarchy to the last spot. So things that we can't prevent from being waste in the first place, things that we can't rescue, there's always going to be this residual component of our food systems that we have to recycle in some way. Food scraps that just aren't edible for humans or for animal consumption. And those shouldn't be squandered either. Those shouldn't be landfilled or sent to waste combustion. So what are some of the opportunities in Onondaga County to recycle those for beneficial use? Here's a photo in the background of Onondaga County Resource Recovery Agency's award-winning compost facility on the west side of Syracuse. And so I would like to do some more stuff through the grants that I have to create more opportunities for stakeholders and residents within Onondaga County. So businesses, institutions, schools, and residents, how can we create more opportunities for them to compost? And when I look around the state, there's a lot of really great initiatives that we can model for this area. So for example, if folks are unable or uninterested in composting where they live, could we set up some sort of micro hauling pickup service so they can have, just like with trash and recycling, they could have another bin that they could put their food scraps into that a hauler would pick up and bring to a different destination to be composted. If we don't have pickup services, there are other parts of the states that have, of New York State, that have set up food scrap drop-off locations. So that would be having certain spots in and around the city. So say like the CNY regional market, where residents could go and once a week drop off their food scraps and then pick up some new food from the vendors at the CNY regional market. And then a hauler would bring that tote over to potentially Okra's facility to be composted, providing more education experiences for residents that want to and are interested in composting at their home, whether that's in their backyard or in a tumbler on their patio or under their kitchen sink with worms for vermicomposting. And then providing technical assistance for institutions and K through 12 schools, so we can help them to figure out how to set up food scrap diversion programs within businesses and institutions and K through 12 schools as well. And then the very last bit of everything. So we prevented food waste, rescuing food waste, we're recycling organic materials. The last part is connecting that whole loop together and finding really good beneficial uses for finished compost. This is a photo from Brady Farm last spring. We brought out some ESF and SU students. We purchased a bunch of compost from Okra, and we helped Jessie and her team to amend some of the soils on Brady Farm. So using food scraps that are turned into compost and then using that to help regenerate primarily agricultural soils in our area, but we can use compost for a lot of different things, not just agricultural soils too. There's a lot of benefits to that we can get at later. So I'm going to stop there. Sorry, Kale, for talking so fast earlier. I hope I was able to slow it down a little bit, but I'm going to stop sharing my screen now so we can get to the next portion of the agenda.
Thanks so much, Jesse and Gabe. I want to open it up for questions. We did spotlight folks, so if you need to switch back to gallery view so you can see everyone's face, that's in the upper right-hand corner. I needed to do that. I don't know if others do. But yeah, open to any questions. You can raise your hand or you can just unmute. And we'll have opportunity for small group discussion after this as well. So any questions for Jesse and Gabe?
I have a question. Oh, sorry.
Yes,
Go ahead.
welcome. Please.
The other-
No, I can go after you.
All right, then I'll take, thank you. Question for Jesse and Gabriel. Oh, sorry, Gabriel. Question for Gabe. To organize a volunteer, do you use any type of software or interface?
Yeah, so this has been an ongoing thing for us to try to figure out our flow with like the back end, right? So organizing volunteers and how they can sign up. So we have tried to use a couple different volunteers. There's like signup.com for volunteers. There's actually apps out there. There's a couple apps out there that are specific to food rescue and coordinating donors to volunteers. They can go in on their phone and click like, yep, I'm going to pick that one up today. For us, we have found that it really doesn't work well in our community. People either respond to just like a group email. We keep things pretty easy. We would like to go towards more techie things, but for right now, for our community, we haven't found something that works really well. We have a couple of volunteers who don't want to put apps on their phones, and a couple of volunteers who even just want to get a phone call when a volunteer opportunity comes up. They don't even, kind of work on emails. So because we have a kind of a diverse group of volunteers, anything from college age kids to retired folks, we really had to figure out a way to make it accessible for as many people as possible and also not drive ourselves nuts as Adrian and I try to coordinate things. So we didn't want to coordinate things on 3 or 4 platforms. So right now it is just us utilizing email. We do things like digital waivers, like if people wanted to do that and sign up before they volunteered with us. If you're looking into technology, I'm happy to give you a list of kind of what's out there if that is helpful for you, because we've done a lot of research on potential of what to use.
Yeah, thank you. I will reach out to you.
Hi, my name is Sheila. So I apologize if my question have already been addressed in the talk because I was a bit late. So I understand that even to get food from food bank requires a lot of kind of like hoops and some literacy, and still there's some question about equity. I wonder if how are you all going to address this and what are your thoughts around it?
Jesse, go for it first, and then I'll follow up if I have additions.
Sure. Yeah. So I was thinking about this question from the pre-meeting before, because I think it's really important. And so I think I'm gonna, in a way, I'm gonna point to Gabe and something that you said in your presentation, that I think it has to, in order for that to occur, for us to bake in equity to all these systems that we're trying to improve upon or create in our area, we have to be engaging the communities that we serve. So instead of coming in and kind of building it for people, having as much communication and transaction communication back and forth with those communities and community members that we want to serve, and able to do it in a way that is equitable, and that the question I was thinking about earlier is culturally appropriate foods. So which can be kind of tricky from the food rescue kind of perspective, because you're getting what's out there. You're not necessarily able to choose those food items. So there might be ways that we can get around that. We can think about other ways of growing food specifically for food rescue networks that can help to fill some of the gaps. So if we're able to see what are the things that are kind of donated most regularly, and we're noticing gaps that is needed and wanted from the community, maybe we can get at it from that side. But that's just me speaking hypothetically because I haven't actually done any of that type of work yet. But I loved it when Gabe said talking to those that are being served by some of these organizations and initiatives, because I think that's monumental. I think that's absolutely crucial.
If I can just add on, and then I might have call on Adrienne because she's done a lot of work in this area. Our thoughts are like, food bank works with primarily food pantries, right? And food rescue allows you to be a bit more noodly. Like we have worked with daycare centers who work with, they have low income kids being there. And so we're able to provide them with we did a huge apple drop at a daycare center. Adrienne was amazing and networked and got in touch with the correctional facility. And they have been one of our biggest, they cook all their meals from scratch, which surprised us. But they have just been absolutely wonderful at reaching that kind of vulnerable population as well. Adrienne, do you have any thoughts on this as well? Because I feel like this is like your wheelhouse.
Yeah, thinking about some of our pantry partners are ones who don't partner with the food bank, rather because it's their choice, or for pantries that are newer or they're really small. So for us, it's not, we don't necessarily have to have that connection with the food bank, but we love when it is there. And yeah, I think just to reiterate what Gabe said, like we have it also gives us like a really wide net to throw of community organizations that we can partner with when we don't have any types of restrictions really beyond just looking for organizations that serve vulnerable community members.
Nell, go ahead. I think that'll be the last question, and then we'll move to small group discussion just so everybody has a chance to brainstorm together as well. Go ahead, Nell.
Yeah, I just wanted clarification, because I think when it comes to donating food, a lot of people have this idea that it's really complicated, or there are a lot of regulations or rules about what kind of food you can donate or when you can donate. And how much truth is there to that, or do people think it's more difficult to donate?
Yeah, I think for us, sometimes we find the end of that spectrum being like, okay, this is a big hurdle to be more from places like your grocery store, right? So I said that we weren't getting any donations from grocery stores. So I'm thinking like chain grocery stores, like Price Chopper. That has been a hurdle for us because their whole concern with liability. Now there's a Good Samaritan law that kind of covers them. And so it's the educational piece. For other people on the other spectrum, like we've had farmers who donated like thousands of pounds of cabbage. That was really low hanging fruit. They were just like, here's the cabbage, like we're good, and so donating for them was really easy. We really, that I mentioned, like really wanting to work with donors, how they want to donate in ways that's most comfortable for them. So we tried to introduce like the app thing with the cabbage farmer. And he was like, I don't care. Like, I don't know, like just coming, like, I'm going to drop it off and it's going to be there for you guys. And kind of was like, I'm good. He didn't even want like, we can present you with like a tax deductible letter at the end of the season. He was like, no, I don't, so there's a wide variety of people and organizations, like the business mindset when it comes to donations. And so everybody that we interact with is very different as far as their needs. And we really try to, first educate and then also just help them and meet them wherever they're comfortable.
I'll just kind of tack onto that a little bit too. So that's with a lot of the education and outreach that I've been doing in the past few years, it's been trying to combat still kind of that myth that exists throughout our society that by donating food, somehow you're putting yourself in a liability position to be sued if someone gets sick from that food. And as Gabe mentioned, there's federal level protections against that through the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act. There's also additional protections through New York State. But there's provisions under those. So you have to make food donations to a nonprofit organization and they have to be made in good faith. So you have to be doing everything you can to make sure that donation is done safely. So that part of it's really simple. As long as you're making donations to a nonprofit organization, you as a donor are protected. I think there's a lot of other complicated things into the donation, the donation kind of like, roadmap that have to be thought of, how, if it's prepared food or if it's perishable food and there needs to be time and temperature controls, do you have the type of equipment that you need to maintain those temperature controls and to get them where they need to be, just to make sure that everything's safe. So I think it all kind of comes back to food safety. That can be really kind of challenging. And looking at Onondaga County, as we start to approach potential partners to plug into a food rescue network, we have to think about bottlenecks at the traditional food pantries and other partners. Do they have cold storage on site? How many days of the week or the month are they open and operating? These are some of the areas that could become kind of tricky, I think, as you're actually starting to move the food. But from the donation side, there are liability protections. Though there are other things that need to be considered. If you're doing a gleaning event, whoever owns the land might have some liability concerns for having people on their space. What if someone trips over a rake and gets hurt? That sort of thing needs to be considered. So great question, though.
Excellent. Thanks again to the speakers and those who asked questions. So I do want to give folks time in small groups to discuss